My name is Elena Whitmore. I'm 34 years old. And my mother missed my wedding because she had a better offer in Monaco. She didn't say it that bluntly. Of course. She called it a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. A charity gala on a yacht. An invitation from a European social circle she had recently worked very hard to enter. She said it would be strategic. She said appearances mattered. So did my wedding. The ceremony was scheduled for a Saturday in early May. The invitations had gone out 6 months earlier. She had confirmed verbally that she would be there. She even helped choose the venue. But 3 weeks before the date, she called me. "I've been invited to Monaco," she said, as if announcing a promotion. "It's exclusive. You don't understand how rare this is." "I understand the date," I replied. "It's the same weekend as my wedding." She paused, then laughed lightly. "You'll have anniversaries every year. This event is singular." That was the moment I realized she had already decided. On the morning of the ceremony, her chair in the front row remained empty. Guests asked politely where she was. I told them she had a prior commitment overseas. I kept my voice steady. I did not elaborate. My husband's parents stood in for the traditional roles without hesitation. They did not question her absence. They did not criticize. They simply showed up. I walked down the aisle without her. The reception continued without disruption. The music played. Speeches were delivered. I smiled for photographs. I did not allow her decision to redefine the day, but I did not forget it either. What most people at the wedding did not know was that my mother's lifestyle, the condo she lived in, the car she leased, the flights she booked without checking prices, was funded through a family trust I managed. When my father passed 8 years earlier, he left behind a structured estate. The primary asset was a diversified investment portfolio. The trust was designed to provide stable income for beneficiaries while preserving principal growth. It included discretionary authority for the managing trustee to approve distributions based on reasonable living expenses and financial responsibility. I became that trustee at 26. At first, the distributions were straightforward: housing costs, healthcare, standard allowances. Over time, the requests expanded. Interior renovations framed as maintenance, vehicle upgrades framed as safety, international trips framed as cultural exposure. The trust covered them because they fell within interpretive boundaries. I approved them because she was my mother. The Monaco trip, technically, was funded partially through accumulated travel points tied to the trust's corporate credit facilities, and partially through discretionary distribution under lifestyle allowances. She did not see the connection. To her, Monaco was an achievement. To me, it was an invoice rooted quietly through a structure she rarely acknowledged. 2 days after the wedding, she sent me photos from the gala: champagne on deck, evening gowns, harbor lights reflecting off the water. "Wish you were here," she wrote. I looked at the message for a long time before responding. "I had somewhere else to be," I typed. She reacted with a heart emoji. What she did not realize was that the trust agreement I managed did not operate on sentiment. It operated on terms, and one of those terms gave the trustee discretion to adjust distributions if beneficiary behavior demonstrated disregard for fiduciary intent or financial discipline. 2 weeks after the ceremony, I scheduled a meeting with our estate attorney, not to retaliate, to review the language carefully, because if Monaco was once in a lifetime, so was my patience. When my father created the trust, he structured it with precision. The principle was protected. Annual distributions were tied to performance thresholds. The trustee, me, had discretion to approve additional requests if they aligned with maintenance of reasonable standard of living and did not jeopardize long-term growth. At 26, I treated that clause cautiously. At 34, I understood how flexible the word reasonable could become. My mother lived in a waterfront condo purchased through the trust 6 years earlier. Technically, It was owned by the trust entity and leased to her at a subsidized rate. The monthly association fees, property taxes, and maintenance assessments were processed through trust accounts. Her car lease was the same. The vehicle was not titled to her personally. It was structured as a transportation expense under discretionary support. Insurance premiums were billed to the trust. So were service contracts. When she began traveling internationally more frequently, she used a premium credit line connected to the trust's investment management account. The rewards points accumulated under that structure. Flights were often paid through those points. Hotels were submitted as lifestyle reimbursements. None of this was illegal. None of it violated the written terms outright. But it required active approval. Every quarter, I reviewed expense reports and distribution requests. Every quarter, I signed off. At first, I justified it as comfort. My father had intended her to be secure. After decades of marriage, she was accustomed to a certain environment. Stability felt like loyalty. Over time, the pattern changed. Security turned into expectation. Expectation turned into assumption. She stopped asking whether something fit within the trust guidelines and began informing me that she had already booked it. "This is normal for our circle," she would say. The circle she referred to did not fund itself. 3 months before my wedding, she requested an interior redesign consultation for the condo. The estimate exceeded what the trust categorized as maintenance. "It's not renovation," she argued. "It's preservation of value." The wording mattered. I approved part of it, reduced the rest, and documented the decision. When the Monaco invitation arrived, she framed it as networking. "These are international investors," she said. "Being visible benefits all of us." The trust was not a branding agency. It was a fiduciary instrument. Still, I authorized partial discretionary funds because it technically fell under lifestyle allowances. The wedding conflict made something clear. Her absence was not about scheduling. It was about priority. She had evaluated my ceremony against a social opportunity and chosen the latter. That choice did not violate a clause. It violated intent. The trust was designed to preserve family stability and financial discipline. It was not designed to subsidize image maintenance while neglecting core obligations. 2 weeks after the wedding, I sat across from the estate attorney and reviewed the discretionary language again. "If a beneficiary demonstrates financially irresponsible behavior," he said, "the trustee may limit non-essential distributions." "What qualifies as non-essential?" I asked. "Discretionary lifestyle expenses," he replied. "Luxury travel, upgraded accommodations, non-primary vehicle leases, any distribution not tied to housing, health, or baseline living standards." The Monaco trip had not broken the trust, but it clarified something I had avoided confronting. My approvals had been emotional. The structure required discipline. The attorney looked at me carefully. "You are not required to maintain someone's preferred lifestyle. You are required to maintain fiduciary integrity." Fiduciary integrity, not affection, not guilt. Integrity. I went home that evening and opened the quarterly distribution file. I did not change the trust. I adjusted the interpretation. And that adjustment would make Monaco feel very different the next time she considered it. The Monaco decision was not the first time my mother chose image over intimacy. It was simply the first time I stopped excusing it. When I graduated from law school, she left the reception early because she had dinner reservations with donors visiting from out of state. She said networking was important for our reputation. I told myself she meant well. When I turned 30, she arrived late to my birthday dinner because she had a charity board cocktail hour she couldn't miss. I rescheduled dessert so she wouldn't feel excluded. Each time, the message was subtle but consistent. Public visibility outranked private presence. The trust had made that pattern comfortable. Because the trust covered her housing, transportation, and travel, she never had to evaluate trade-offs. She never had to choose between attending an event and paying a bill. The consequences were abstract. The lifestyle remained intact. My wedding was different. 3 weeks before the ceremony, when she called about Monaco, she framed it as timing. "These invitations don't come twice," she said. "Neither does walking your daughter down the aisle," I replied. She sighed as if I were being sentimental. "You'll understand when you're older," she said. "Positioning matters." Positioning? The word lingered. She believed the gala would strengthen her social standing. She believed those relationships would translate into influence. She believed missing my wedding would not have measurable cost. And for years, she had been correct. Because I absorbed the cost, I managed the trust quietly. I smoothed over the optics. I approved allowances that supported the narrative she preferred to maintain. When she booked first-class tickets using trust-backed points, I categorized them under travel allocations. When she upgraded her vehicle beyond standard lease terms, I documented it as transportation necessity. The structure allowed flexibility. I supplied it. After the wedding, when she sent photographs from the yacht in Monaco, I did not respond immediately. I enlarged one image on my phone, her smiling under string lights. Champagne in hand, ocean behind her. On the same day, I had walked into the reception hall without my mother in the front row. She had not apologized. She had not acknowledged the weight of the absence. Instead, she sent pictures. 2 days after she returned, she called casually. "How was everything?" she asked. "It was beautiful," I said. "I'm sure it was," she replied. "I told everyone here that you understood why I couldn't make it." That sentence clarified more than anything else. She believed I had endorsed her choice. I did not argue on the phone. I did not raise my voice. I simply listened. "You know," she added, "Monaco opened some interesting doors. It could lead to opportunities." "For whom?" I asked. "For all of us," she answered. The trust did not benefit from social anecdotes. The portfolio grew through disciplined investment, not yacht conversations. When we ended the call, I sat in my office and opened the trust's quarterly expense summary. Lifestyle travel had increased 30% year over year. Vehicle upgrades exceeded standard replacement cycle thresholds. Interior redesign expenses were categorized as value preservation. Though market analysis did not support the claim, none of it endangered principle yet. But the trajectory mattered. The trust was meant to preserve stability across generations. It was not meant to underwrite personal branding while foundational relationships were neglected. The Monaco trip was not just a missed ceremony. It was evidence that boundaries had dissolved. For years, I told myself I was honoring my father's intention by maintaining her comfort. What I had actually been doing was subsidizing a version of reality where consequences did not apply. 2 weeks after the ceremony, I finalized a distribution review schedule with the estate attorney. No announcements, no emotional confrontation, just documentation. The pattern had continued because I kept approving it. And approval, in a trust structure, is power. I was about to use it differently. I did not confront my mother immediately. I started with the documents. The trust agreement was 32 pages long, written in precise language my father had reviewed line by line before signing. I had read it dozens of times over the years, but always through the lens of flexibility. This time, I read it as a fiduciary. Section 4.2 outlined discretionary distributions for maintenance of reasonable lifestyle, consistent with historical standards. Section 4.5 gave the trustee authority to suspend or modify non-essential distributions if beneficiary behavior demonstrated financial imprudence or actions contrary to the trust's long-term purpose. The Monaco trip did not violate the trust, but it revealed something else. The trust was not created to elevate social standing. It was created to prevent instability after my father's death. It was meant to secure housing, healthcare, and baseline dignity. It was not meant to subsidize avoidance. I met with the estate attorney again. "If I reduce discretionary allowances," I asked, "what is required procedurally?" "You must document rationale," he replied. "You cannot act emotionally. You must demonstrate alignment with fiduciary duty." I can do that, I said. We outlined the changes carefully. Primary residence expenses would remain covered. Basic transportation would remain covered, but luxury vehicle leases would no longer be renewed through trust accounts. Travel reimbursements would be limited to family-related events or documented business relevance tied directly to asset management. Credit facilities linked to the trust would be closed and replaced with fixed monthly distribution transfers for baseline living expenses. No punishment, just structure. 2 weeks after my wedding, I signed the restructuring notice. The following Monday, the trust's financial administrator executed the adjustments. The premium credit line tied to travel points was closed. The quarterly discretionary allowance was reduced to baseline. The vehicle lease renewal clause was removed from automatic approval. Notifications were generated automatically through the management portal. I did not call her to warn her. Trust governance does not require pre-negotiation with beneficiaries. 3 days later, she called. Her voice was sharp. My card was declined at the marina, she said without greeting. There must be a mistake. There isn't, I replied calmly. What did you do? I restructured discretionary distributions. There was silence, but not confusion. You're punishing me, she said. No, I answered. I'm enforcing fiduciary limits. You can't just cut me off. I didn't, I said. Housing is covered. Healthcare is covered. Baseline monthly distribution continues. Luxury travel and supplemental allowances have been suspended. This is absurd, she said. Do you know how embarrassing it is to have a card declined? Yes, I replied. I do. That was the only emotional sentence I allowed myself. She shifted tactics. You're doing this because of the wedding. I'm doing this because the trust is not a branding fund. I sacrificed for you, she said. And the trust reflects that, I answered. But it does not exist to maintain appearances. Her breathing changed. The anger was still there, but it was now mixed with calculation. How long is this supposed to last? She asked. Until discretionary requests align with the trust's purpose, I replied. And who decides that? I do, I said. That was the part she had forgotten. For years, the trust had felt invisible because I had exercised discretion generously. She experienced it as entitlement. Now it felt like authority. Monaco had not broken the trust. It had broken the illusion that someone else would always absorb the cost. And illusions are expensive when they expire. The first real consequence did not come from me. It came from the condo association. 3 weeks after the restructuring, I received an automated notice from the property management company. The quarterly HOA assessment had not been processed through the usual discretionary channel. Under the new structure, only base housing costs were auto-approved. Supplemental assessments required manual review. My mother called before I could. They're saying the payment hasn't cleared, she said. This is your responsibility. It's the trust's responsibility for primary fees, I replied. The supplemental marina access upgrade you approved last quarter is not primary. That upgrade preserves property value, she insisted. It enhances convenience, I corrected. Not structural value. She was quiet for a moment. You're splitting hairs, she said. No, I answered. I'm drawing lines. 2 days later, her car dealership contacted the trust administrator about the upcoming lease renewal. Under the old structure, the trust covered a luxury model upgrade every 3 years. Under the new interpretation, only standard transportation was covered. She called again. They expect confirmation for the new lease, she said. The trust will cover a standard model within transportation guidelines, I replied. If you prefer the upgraded package, you'll need to fund the difference personally. I don't have liquidity sitting around for that, she snapped. You have a monthly distribution, I said. You can allocate it. That's for living expenses. Yes, there it was. For years, living expenses had quietly expanded to include status markers. Now they were shrinking back to baseline. Her social circle noticed before she admitted it. She canceled 2 international trips scheduled for the fall. She declined a membership renewal at a private travel club. The marina invitation list shortened. When she called this time, her tone had changed. "You've made things very uncomfortable," she said. "The trust still covers your home," I replied. "Your utilities, your health coverage, your baseline monthly distribution. You know that's not how our circle operates. Our circle is not funded by the trust," I said. "Your living standard is." She tried a different angle. "People are asking questions." "Then answer them honestly," I replied. "And what exactly should I say?" "That you're managing your own expenses." The silence on the other end was longer than before. For the first time, she was facing trade-offs. If she wanted a European gala, she would need to budget for it. If she wanted a luxury vehicle, she would need to adjust elsewhere. The trust would not compensate for image. A week later, she asked to meet. Not at the marina, not at the private club, at a cafe near her condo. When I arrived, she was already seated. No designer sunglasses, no oversized handbag placed strategically on the table. She looked tired. "I didn't think you'd actually follow through," she said. "I didn't think you'd miss my wedding," I replied. The sentence hung there. Not dramatic, just factual. She exhaled slowly. "You're making a point." "Yes," I said. "And what is it?" "That support is not the same as sponsorship." She looked down at her hands. "For years," she said quietly, "I assumed you understood how important positioning was." "I understand cost," I replied. She lifted her eyes. "I never meant to make you feel secondary." "You didn't have to mean it," I said. "You just had to choose it." There was no shouting, no apology yet, just awareness. Monaco had been glamorous because it felt consequence-free. Now, every choice required calculation. Apparently, Monaco is less dazzling when you're the one swiping the card. The adjustments did not ruin her. They forced her to evaluate. Within 2 months, she sold the marina access upgrade. The condo remained, but she let go of the private docking privileges that had come with additional fees. The trust continued covering core housing expenses, but the optional layers began to fall away. The car lease ended without renewal under the luxury tier. She chose a standard model within the transportation allowance. It was still reliable. It simply did not announce itself. Her travel calendar changed most dramatically. The spontaneous European weekends stopped. The invitations still arrived, but she now asked questions before accepting. "How much will this cost?" became a sentence she used reluctantly at first, then more naturally. One evening she called, not angry this time, but unsettled. "I had to decline a trip to Milan," she said. "It didn't make financial sense." "That's responsible," I replied. "It's limiting," she said. "It's real," I answered. The truth was that she had lived for years in a space between access and ownership. The trust had provided access. I had allowed it to feel like ownership. When that shifted, the adjustment was not financial alone. It was psychological. Her social circle responded quickly. Invitations slowed. Conversations changed tone. Some of the people who once praised her presence stopped calling as often. "It's amazing," she said during one lunch, "how quickly proximity fades when you stop paying for it." "That's because proximity built on expense isn't loyalty," I said. She did not argue. 3 months after the restructuring, she requested a formal meeting to review the trust's distribution schedule. She arrived with notes. "I've recalculated my monthly expenses," she said. "If I adjust discretionary spending, the baseline allowance is sufficient." It was the first time she framed the conversation in numbers instead of optics. I reviewed her revised budget. It was realistic. It prioritized housing, healthcare, and moderate travel within means. "This aligns with the trust's intent," I said. "So nothing changes?" she asked cautiously. "The baseline remains. Supplemental distributions will be considered case by case if tied to long-term value." She nodded slowly. "You're not trying to control me," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm separating support from status." That distinction had been blurred for years. For the first time, she acknowledged something without defensiveness. "I think I confused comfort with entitlement," she admitted. I enabled that confusion, I said. We sat quietly for a moment. I did want to be in Monaco, she said. It felt important. And I wanted you at my wedding, I answered. This time, she did not deflect. I know, she said. The apology was not elaborate, but it was real. Financial discipline had done what emotional arguments could not. It had created accountability. The trust had not been weaponized. It had been clarified, and clarity is uncomfortable before it becomes stabilizing. Monaco had not disappeared from her life entirely. It simply required a personal invoice now. And invoices change decisions. 6 months after the restructuring, my mother invited me to lunch. Not at the waterfront restaurant where she used to reserve a corner table. Not at the members-only club where the staff greeted her by name. She chose a quiet neighborhood place within walking distance of her condo. When I arrived, she was already there, reading the menu carefully, not scanning for the most impressive item. Calculating. You look well, she said. So do you, I replied. And she did. Less polished, perhaps. Fewer visible signals of status, but steadier. We ordered simply, no wine, no elaborate additions. Halfway through the meal, she set her fork down. I've been thinking about the wedding, she said. I waited. I told myself Monaco was strategic, she continued. That it would open doors, that I could make up for missing your ceremony later. She paused. But there isn't another ceremony. No, I said quietly. There isn't. She nodded. I treated it like a scheduling conflict, she admitted. It wasn't. It was a priority decision. That was the first time she used the right word. I thought you'd understand, she said. Because you always did. I always compensated, I replied. There was no accusation in my tone, just accuracy. For years, she said slowly, the trust made it possible for me not to weigh trade-offs. I didn't have to choose between events and expenses. I didn't have to decide what mattered more. You absorbed the difference. Yes. And when you stopped, she continued, I had to decide. She looked at me directly. Monaco was expensive, she said. Not just financially. I let that settle. I missed something I won't get back, she added. This time, I did not rush to soften it. That's true, I said. She took a breath. I'm sorry. It was not dramatic. It was not accompanied by tears. It was clear. I know, I replied. After lunch, we walked back toward her condo. She spoke about restructuring her investments personally, outside the trust distributions. She had begun consulting a financial advisor independently. She had started tracking her own spending. I never learned to separate access from ownership, she said. Your father handled everything. Then you did. And now, I asked. Now I am, she answered. That mattered more than the apology. The trust remained intact. The baseline distributions continued. The portfolio grew steadily under conservative management. Discretionary requests came with documentation instead of assumption. Monaco still appeared occasionally on her calendar, but when it did, it was funded deliberately. She paid for it, and when she paid for it, she attended differently. The illusion that someone else would always absorb the cost was gone. On my first anniversary, she arrived early. She brought no extravagant gift, just a handwritten card. I won't miss the important ones again, she said. Monaco had been marketed as once in a lifetime. So was my wedding. The difference was not exclusivity. It was consequence. And once consequence entered the equation, everything became clearer. Support remained. Entitlement did not.